These cameras, like the Bolex, have 3 lenses. They're on a turret, 3 lens mounts, I should say. So you can screw on multiple lenses. But for convenience today, I'm just going to use this little zoom lens. And it's a C-mount lens, which is very common, a 25mm screw thread. And you just screw it on. And there you are. That's the picture-taking position. If I wanted to use a different lens, I could screw it there at the same time and then just rotate like this and film with that lens, and then rotate back if I wanted to film with this one again. So this is the inside of the camera, and I'm now going to load it. Actually, before we start, well, the first thing to do anyway is to wind up the spring, because it needs some energy that was already wound. Like all motion picture mechanisms, it has moving sprocket wheels that rotate at a continuous speed, and it has a gate area where the film is where the exposures are actually going to be made. And the film goes through the gate. I'll close that, and then I'll make sure that the perforation has once again met the sprocket, the holes, the perforations on the film, and it has. So then I bend around again for the bottom sprocket wheel and push it in there, and then once again I just make sure that the film has met those teeth on the sprocket wheel, and it has. So now it's ready to run. I need a little bit more film so I can thread up this. So turrets were very common when there were no zoom lenses, before zoom lenses. But zoom lenses are so convenient, and they're typically very good that you know, turrets aren't really needed anymore. Our films are very formal, and we try to make them very musical. And we mean something very particular by that. What we're aiming to achieve is an abstract structure that nonetheless holds together like an arc. Yeah? So our films are very much about the total duration. We need people to watch the whole film. And our concerns within the film are typically abstract and graphic and rhythmic and to do with patterns and light and shade. We're trying to make an experience for the retina, for the eye and the brain, more than we are about trying to convey some point or information or something meaningful. We think that if you're interested in meaning and concepts, there are better forms than motion picture, especially experimental motion picture. Or I also think that one of the features of being human is that we'll find meaning in anything. So we let meaning rise by itself. We let concepts just happen on their own. Eventually, when we get to an editing stage, we'll begin to think, this makes sense from a conceptual point of view. We might change the title that we've been working on because we see now what the film is about, or we see now a layer of concept that is there that we hadn't been working with, but is naturally emerged. I do like showing our work to people who don't have an experimental background. In some respects, I think it helps keep us honest as filmmakers. We usually find with a non-film audience that some people find the patterns and rhythms confronting, but other people pass through that and are able to sit back and relax and enjoy these rhythms and things that are happening. And they can be quite passionate about their response. They can really enjoy our films. There aren't so many of us around, and there are definitely people who are fans of this kind of approach to experimental cinema, the materialist, structuralist approach. And we get a lot of very positive feedback from them. But it's not everyone's cup of tea, because some people are first and foremost interested in the conceptual and in contemporary concerns. And, you know, experimental film is probably the broadest category of film, and there has to be room for everybody. My first exposure to this kind of filmmaking was back in the 80s, back in the late 80s, in the Melbourne Super 8 scene, which was a very insular scene. We didn't have the internet, of course, and we didn't have access to a collection of films, and most of the people in the scene weren't studying experimental film. There wasn't so much study of experimental film in Melbourne. So it was kind of naive, and it was beautiful. It organically was a scene that was very interested in the kind of film that we make now, in materialist, formal, experimental, structuralist kinds of films. Not everybody did that, and at the time I didn't do that. At the time I made narrative films. There were a number of Australian filmmakers at the time who are quite well known now, who were formative, and they were working in this tradition. And I'd like to single out Paul Winkler, who's a German immigrant to Australia. His films were deeply informative of my approach and my style. And also the Cantrells, in particular a film called Myself When 13, which is a very rigorous exploration of a very short sequence of maybe 5 seconds of a young person walking towards the camera, but each frame has been hand-colored, it's been printed on paper and hand-colored. And that rigorous approach that I came across in that film was very formative. And I guess at the time that's what I aspired to, but I didn't understand. When I returned to filmmaking in the early 2000s, that's where I went. It was ready to come out. And it was a very, very productive time for me from then on. To some extent as an antidote or a relief or a detox from the digital thing. The AI is, of course, hyper-digital. This can be the complete opposite. And I do think this kind of filmmaking that we do, that's heavily emphasizing analog and material things, has a future in helping keeping experimental film grounded in the real world. Its danger, I think, is too much drifting into the world of the pixel. Yeah? One of the things that I find most engaging about analog experimental film is the way in which materialist analog cinema can tell us something about our material existence, our physical being in the world, a physical world. I haven't yet gotten that from digital experimental film. I can't see a logical reason why it can't, but I haven't seen it yet. And this is what I mean about going down the AI path, having to find a more humble aesthetic to connect it with the ground again, with the earth, and with physical things rather than just with pixels and numbers.
Each time actually there's a small change, and when you've been watching for a little while, you start to not just experience the broad initial thing, but then you start to experience just these subtle changes. And we like to think that this is like a kind of visual music that comes out of abstracting from images.
Right? Zoom in, now focus. Do you understand?
Richard and Diana are not just filmmakers, they're also teachers, leading workshops that give aspiring filmmakers a hands-on experience in creating experimental and alchemic films.